live question. Insecurity to immigrant families. Hello, welcome to my live show on all the social media platforms. I'm attorney Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, immigration lawyer in Texas, here to answer all your questions and give you the news updates. Today is a bit of a special show. You might notice that I have a different background than we're used to. I'm at the Dixie Dude Ranch in Bandera, Texas, and as soon as we wrap this show, I'll be going on my first trail ride. So that's why I'm very geared up for a trail ride. But before that, there's a lot to talk about. So let's get right to it. This has been a bit of a kick in the pants week. We had a sort of a uplifting moment, last week when we had the federal judge block the TPS cancellation. We know we've got the CHNV, the Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela program in litigation. Then the rallies happened on April 5th and lots of people gathered. There was lots of solidarity. And just yesterday, so today's Tuesday, April 8th, just yesterday, the Supreme Court issued two back-to-back decisions, neither of which were good. And I'm feeling a little bit like a deflated balloon right now after the decisions from yesterday. So let me tell you about those two decisions. One of them was related to the case of Abrego Garcia. He's the Salvadoran man who was granted protection in the United States. He went before an immigration judge. He came here as a teenager, actually fleeing gang violence in El Salvador, got protection from an immigration judge. And at one point he was arrested at a Home Depot, and the police put in the report that somebody that he was arrested with claimed that he was connected to the gangs. There was no evidence of that. They did not charge him with anything, but ICE used that to pick him up 5 years later. He was driving his U.S. citizen son and was pulled over and arrested and actually erroneously sent back to El Salvador to the CCOT prison, which is the prison that they have opened and created for gang members in El Salvador. And the president of that country has stated that no one will ever leave. So I think that's something that we need to make sure we all pay attention to. These cases of people being deported to El Salvador isn't just a deportation. We're not just sending people to a country, like a third party country, which he's Salvadoran, so for him it is his own country. We're sending them into a jail with a lifetime prison sentence with no criminal conviction or even charge against them. Like, it is absolutely terrifying and shocking that this is being allowed or perpetrated by our own government. So what happened was they erroneously sent him to El Salvador. They acknowledged that it was a mistake. In fact, one of the high-ranking officials in the department had to testify in the federal lawsuit, and he ended up getting fired because he went to the court and told the truth. And anyway, the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court punted for one day. So essentially, the Chief Justice Roberts said, we're not going to order his return as of Monday by 5 o'clock. We're going to give this one more day for briefing. So we have a lot of time, not a lot of time, a little bit of time to obtain the final decision from the court. But it's not looking great, especially when you look at the second case, which is the case of the Venezuelans who were also deported to El Salvador, but this was under the Alien Enemies Act, right? So this is that 1700s law that Trump used to detain and deport Venezuelans without criminal convictions or any due process to El Salvador. That lawsuit was filed in Washington, D.C. The federal judge there was like, this is absolutely illegal. No way can you do this. And there was this whole back and forth about he had ordered them not to take off. 2 of the 3 planes were already in the air, et cetera. That went up to the Circuit Court of Appeals, which sided with the federal judge. And then that case also made it to the Supreme Court yesterday. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court sided with the Trump administration ultimately. Now, they didn't say that the Trump administration can use the Alien Enemies Act. What they said, they used sort of a jurisdictional argument. And they said that This lawsuit should have been filed in Texas, which was the processing site before these people were deported to El Salvador. And this is something that the Trump administration does, is they intentionally detain people in Louisiana and Texas because we're part of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So it's a pretty conservative, anti-immigrant federal court jurisdiction. So the Supreme Court said you shouldn't have filed the lawsuit in DC, you should have filed the lawsuit in Texas. And that they also said that these people do have due process rights, but they need to be filing habeas petitions in federal court in the proper jurisdiction. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the Supreme Court is going to grant the usage of the Alien Enemies Act to the Trump administration. They sort of are, hiding this in jurisdictional arguments, but it is pretty nauseating that they didn't just clearly order this was illegal and side with the federal judges who found it to be so. So not great news coming out of the Supreme Court. I see your live questions coming in. Please keep them coming. Let me just finish going through the rest of the news of the week, and then we'll get to your live questions. Thank you. All right, so we have the U.S. Coast Guard has increased border patrols amid maritime immigration, and we're also seeing increased detention centers in Texas. So they're planning to reopen the Dilley Detention Center, which is about an hour south of San Antonio. Those are for families, detained families. It's looking like they're going to reopen or open a detention center in Laredo, and then also one in East Texas near Louisiana. So again, DHS likes to detain people in Texas because the courts here are pretty conservative, and the Fifth Circuit is our appellate court jurisdiction. So things tend to go the way of the government or DHS in immigration cases. And so we're seeing more and more and more detention here in Texas. So for immigration lawyers like me in Texas, I know we're all thinking about this. We're going to have to start, gearing up to file habeas, mandamus, and federal court. And of course, the Trump administration also has issued an executive order threatening immigration lawyers who sue them in federal court. They did that a couple of weeks ago. So it's all getting pretty hot. There has been the suspension of the refugee program for Afghan families. What this means, guys, is that there were so many people in Afghanistan who were supportive of the U.S. military efforts there. We were there for decades. And there were people who served the military, the U.S. military operations, as translators or other support. And when we pulled out of Afghanistan, that placed all of those people who had supported us in significant danger. And so we initially did refugee processing for a lot of them. We had people from Afghanistan coming in as refugees, and they were working through their family petitions. So getting their wives or their husbands or their children or their parents to be able to come get to safety with them. And we suspended, or the Trump administration suspended, that refugee processing. So there's thousands of families that are separated when they were actually placed in harm's way because of their support of our country. Of course, we've seen more visa revocations of student protesters of the pro-Palestine protests. There's a few universities that have received massive revocations of visas, and we can assume that DHS is going to go detain or attempt to detain those students who are having those visas revoked. So I'm sure this is already understood, but it goes without saying, any student visa holders who have gotten a revocation notice or who participated in pro-Palestine protests or shared things on your social media should immediately be consulting with an immigration lawyer about your case and how to protect yourself. And then finally, they are expanding detention facilities at Guantanamo Bay for more migrants. They're looking to house up to 30,000 people. I'm just looking through. I sort of have touched on the rest of the news. I have a lot more reports, but you get the gist. You get the gist. Student visa crackdown, Supreme Court, no bueno. More detention centers, less due process. There's your summary of the news of the week. Okay, some live questions coming in. Thanks for bringing these questions, guys. Are people any safer from ICE in sanctuary cities? Katya from Instagram. Yes and no. I mean, in a sanctuary city, that's not really a defined thing, but essentially what it means is that the city where you live has is resisting sharing information with ICE, or at least enforcing ICE. So that what that means is that the police shouldn't be calling ICE when they pull someone over, for example. So in that way, you are safer. But in other ways, it tends to bring more scrutiny from ICE on those jurisdictions. So we see more large-scale raids in places that resist ICE cooperation. You know, Los Angeles, New York City, Denver, places like that tend to get more ire or more attention from ICE authorities when they are uncooperative. So ultimately, you know, if I were an immigrant, I think I would choose to live in a sanctuary city, but everybody needs to understand the risks and their rights when moving about the world, and, you know, what your constitutional rights are. And if you haven't, you know, accessed that information, talk to a lawyer. I have this information available on my resources website, which is abogadakate.com, and you can download the safety planning packet and the red card so that you can know your rights. Another question, and where do you see the trend of all of this going? The pace of the escalation is terrifying. I totally agree. You know, before yesterday, I would have said, in the arc of time where we are, you know, the administration began, they announced a bunch of executive orders and took a bunch of actions, then lawsuits were filed. And then just starting in the last couple of weeks, because of the timeline of things, we were starting to see federal court orders and injunctions, right? So we were starting to see the check of the judiciary starting to come into play. And everybody has been sort of watching this to say, okay, what's going to happen when, you know, cases make their way up to the Supreme Court, and if the Trump administration decides not to comply with those orders, for example, then what happens in our democracy? That's unprecedented. We don't know. But yesterday, what happened was a bit of a gut punch, because it seemed like the Supreme Court, in any event, is not really going to, I don't know, uphold what the lower courts are doing, perhaps. It's not looking good from a Supreme Court perspective. So that certainly emboldens and empowers the Trump administration for doing more. In TikTok, what about Mahmoud Khalil? So Mahmoud is still detained. They have charged him as both deportable for the, you know, protest activities. They've also charged him as inadmissible because they're claiming that he committed fraud on his green card application. I disagree with that ground, but it's ultimately going to be up to an immigration judge. He remains in detention, which is also very shocking. But they do some forum shopping. So they picked him up in New York and took him immediately down to Louisiana. Louisiana has a notoriously slow federal court, and then the appellate court is the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I think we're going to see more of this, like forum shopping. And based on the order of the Supreme Court yesterday on the Abrego Garcia case, the guy from El Salvador who was sent to the CCOP prison, we're going to start to see more. Actually, I'm sorry, it was the Venezuelan case where they claimed the case was filed in the wrong jurisdiction. So we might start to see more of that from the Supreme Court. But I think ultimately, bottom line, it doesn't appear as if the Supreme Court is going to be holding the line on these illegal activities by the Trump administration against immigrants. That's the concern I have as of yesterday afternoon. You know, this was a development as of yesterday evening. So let me get to some of your questions. I will prioritize your live questions. We can talk about current events on immigration. We can have a debate if you have things you want to say or questions. I mean, especially people who are like, wait, I just don't understand all of this. You're trying to make sense of the different news that you hear, but you are respectful. Bring it. Let's talk. Like, my friend Marla always says, bring your skeptic to this conversation. I'm available for that. And I think we need to be having those conversations, because a lot of misinformation is happening from traditionally reputable sources or semi-reputable sources, like governmental leaders. And so I think it's really important to say, like, okay, well, I'm hearing this thing and you're saying this other thing, like, make it make sense and tell me if you're having those questions. How does it work if millions have protested for Palestine? I've been protesting since 2016. You know, the protests right now, the people who are being attacked for protesting are not the US citizens. I mean, once they cross that line, then we might start to see a lot more people getting concerned. I think right now a lot of people are like, well, it's just the immigrants, and like the student visa holders don't have the right to stay here. They're here on our invitation, and if they commit activities that we don't like, well, then we just kick them out. Or permanent residents, I mean, that's a stronger line, but permanent residents who have permanent status in the United States can still lose their status if they commit crimes, for example. But US citizens, I mean, we'll see what happens when they start going in that direction. That's going to be a whole nother level of fascism when we start to see that happening. But for right now, the protesters, the student protesters who are on student visas or other temporary status, any DACA recipients, et cetera, who have participated in the protest or even shared pro-Palestine content on your social media, I think you should be paying attention, consulting with a lawyer, talking about how to protect yourself. Permanent residents, it seems like the permanent residents that they're going after are the ones who are like the leaders of the protests, who have done really public activities, like publishing, op-eds. Flower Girl, what's going on with initial DACA? Nothing really right now. We're sort of theoretically under the latest court order, initial DACA could be filed. And so some really brave people who want to file initial DACA theoretically could, but myself and the other lawyers that I know, we're sort of waiting to get an indication from the Trump administration about how they're going to process those cases before we start filing them. The thought is we have to defund foreign. Oh, that's interesting. We have to defund foreign influence at our schools. Yeah. Okay, here's a Spanish question. I'll read it in Spanish and then I'll tell you guys in English. Mi sobrino está renovando su residencia con ustedes. Okay, that's Osvaldo. Si tiene un caso con nosotros, debemos hablar en privado. This is a case question about one of my clients, and I want to talk to that person directly. Case questions, let's talk in private because we don't want to publicize your information. So Osvaldo, te vamos a contactar, okay, para discutir la pregunta. This is like, I don't know what these glitter badges are and all this is kind of new to me on TikTok. All these fun things are coming in. I think they're fun anyway. Okay, reading questions that are coming in. I just had an EB, national interest waiver approved 3 years ago, but my permanent residency was denied 2 years ago. Our previous lawyer left us without status for 2 days. Is there any chance to fix this issue? They're doing this. They're cracking down on people who just have a day or two. Let's consult. Maybe there's a waiver available. Maybe there's another option. I'd like to talk to you about what happened and see if there's some other workaround that we can do. Flower Girl, what could happen if the administration does not follow the latest DACA ruling? I mean, theoretically, DACA could go away. DACA is something that is at the mercy of the president. It's a temporary program. I don't get the sense that they want to cancel DACA. I've not heard them, talking about going after the Dreamers, and I think that would sort of spark so much protest and outrage that they may not touch it. They really seem to be focusing on, Venezuelan gang members, other criminals, and then pro-Palestine protesters, right? Because those are the people that the general public can sort of say like, oh, that's a them issue. That's not an us issue. But once we start getting into like the Dreamers, then everybody else is going to start to care a little bit more. That's just my opinion. I don't think they would go after the Dreamers, but anything's possible. Do you share when the rallies are being held in Austin? Yeah, I can start to share that on my pages. This rally on Saturday was the 4-5 rally, the Hands Off rally that was like in multiple cities around the country. It was really great. I was there in Austin, and Lloyd Doggett and Greg Casar, 2 representatives, spoke, and then Texas Senator Eckhart spoke. She is like, man, that woman's got some, I don't know, oomph to her. I love hearing her speak. And then Representative Vicki Goodwin spoke, and then a bunch of other people spoke. It was really uplifting to be in that energy, to be around those people, to be chanting and protesting. And I think all of us need to be doing more about that. I mean, the conversation at the protest was like, what can we all be doing? Well, it's engaging in our civic duty in the civic discourse. So going to the protests, talking online, calling your legislators. I know that gets tired and old, but those things really matter. And over and over and over, our represented officials say that it matters, that they make a tally of the calls that they're getting. And the way that the seesaw is tipping actually makes a difference for them. So just taking the moment to actually call in and let your voice be heard. And if you don't know who to call or what to say, I recommend 5calls, the number 5calls.org. You just go in. It's really easy. It tags your location so it knows who your representatives are. You click on the issue that matters to you, and it gives you a script to read and a number to call. I mean, it's just like, you don't even have to think about it. You can just say, like, I'm outraged in general. What do I do? Go to 5calls and it'll tell you what to do. So that's what I recommend we do to get more involved. Let me see. I'm getting something here. Okay. More case questions. I'm 21 and I came to the US at age 4. My fiance has a pending asylum case with a final court date in October. After we marry, can he add me to his case? Would I qualify for a work permit or residency if he's approved? I don't have a social security number and I grew up without legal status. Yeah, I think we should consult about whether it makes sense to add you before or after. If he adds you to the case beforehand, if it depends on, well, he's got a court date, so he shouldn't add you to his court case. So yes, if he gets approved, then he can petition for you. I would go ahead and get married before his approval. You don't want to get married after the approval. But the good news is in Texas, we have informal marriage. So you don't have to like go have some big wedding or, you can just go register your marriage at the date that you select. So you can just go in and say like, oh, we actually got married 6 months ago and you both signed the certificate, and it's really easy. So that's what I would do before his court date, is go ahead and get married. Question, what is going to happen with the IRS and ICE? It's true they are sharing info, from Angela in Instagram. Okay, yeah. So, but the good news is on the information sharing is it's not just some carte blanche access by ICE to IRS data, which is what they kind of want us to think. Actually, what it is ICE has to request files from the IRS. And right now it's limited in scope to people who already have like orders of deportation and they're looking for them. And then they can ask IRS for that person's information. That's the limitation of that information sharing. It's not like everybody who's ever filed a tax return can now get their information shared with ICE, which is great. What recommendations do the attorneys have for travelers that use advance parole? So advance parole is travel permission, and you can get advance parole like if you have DACA or if you have TPS or if you have a pending green card application. But you've got to keep in mind with advance parole that even though you have the approval to depart, CBP or customs at the airport has the final authority about whether to readmit you when you're seeking to come back. So you should be really, really thoughtful and careful. I would say only do advance parole if you have a lawyer and that lawyer has reviewed your case and you've been very honest with them about your background, and only if it achieves a necessary outcome. So for example, DACA, advance parole, so then you could adjust status through marriage to a US citizen. That would be a worthy advance parole. Or if you have a green card application pending and you have an emergency in the family or a death in the family and you just have to go abroad before you come back in. Those are reasons that I would, as a lawyer, sort of get behind my client actually leaving and coming back. But if you just haven't seen your family in a long time or you just want to take a vacation, not advisable to use advance parole to travel, in my opinion, right now, based on everything that we're seeing at the airports. What about Social Security sharing? So Social Security sharing, there isn't a Social Security directive to share right now that I've seen. Of course, that could have been announced in the last few days and I missed it. What we saw last week was, this is so stupid, y'all. Elon Musk, in some presentation where he was touting, the success of his Doge activities, helped put up some chart behind him, and he said, look at all of the non-citizens who have gotten Social Security numbers, as if to suggest undocumented people are taking advantage of the Social Security system, when actually people, non-citizens who get Social Security numbers, have authorized work permission or they have green cards and they're receiving a Social Security number so that they can work and pay into the system. And here's a stat for you. Undocumented immigrants paid in $13 billion into the Social Security system, and immigrants only took out $1 billion. So it's a $12 billion net benefit to the Social Security system that immigrants have Social Security numbers. So, but there's no information sharing memorandum going on between the SSA and ICE that I know of at this moment. Can the Trump administration revoke my green card without any justification? They can attempt to, and it's super, super, super rare. Like, this is what they're doing with Mahmoud Khalil, who hasn't been charged with anything, and they picked him up and they said he's deportable based on his activities and that they have adverse foreign policy consequences in the United States. That was the ground of deportability that they charged him under. They have to go before an immigration judge and prove their case. And they actually added some grounds to his case so that, because they knew that their argument was pretty flimsy. So theoretically, can they do it? They can put people into deportation proceedings, yes. But can they just like revoke somebody's status? No. And this is also true at the airport. CBP does not have the authority to revoke someone's green card at the airport. What they can do is place that person into secondary inspection and interrogate them and threaten them and maybe even detain them and get them to sign a revocation of their green card status. It's an I-407, by the way. I-407. If you are a green card holder and somebody puts a form I-407 in front of you, do not sign that thing, because you are voluntarily giving up your green card if you do. You need to talk to a lawyer, and only an immigration judge can revoke a green card. At a hearing before the judge, with testimony, with cross-examination, it's a big old thing. You can't just have it taken away from you at the airport, okay? Is this Trump administration... Does the risk of being denied re-entry to the country by using advanced parole increase? Yes. Yes. CBP has the authority to deny entry to anyone who is an immigrant, except for a green card holder or a citizen. They can just decline to allow that person to enter, including people who have advanced parole. So you got to be really, really careful using advanced parole. That's why I say talk to a lawyer and only use it in actual times of emergency or need. Okay, last question, and then I'm going to talk about our action item of the week. With the new administration, if I have my work permit approved, is it still safe to travel outside the country? I sort of already answered that. I would say not really, unless it's an emergency. I would not use advanced parole. Okay, I'll do one more question because that was a fast one. What actually happens when a company sponsors you? Do they cover the fees, or do I have to pay for the visa? Is it possible to apply for a work visa if the job is willing to hire you but not sponsor you? It depends. I would say in general, the company is going to need to pay something because they have to show that they are paying a fair wage for an H-1B, for example, and the fees that they pay to the lawyer count. Right? Or don't count, I'm sorry, toward your wages. And then like for a perm case, they do have to pay for it. So, but can you help out? In some cases you can. Basically, what I recommend is that the employer and the employee consult together with a lawyer and we can talk through that. Last live question from Mr. Grinch, should we worry about IJ decision being overturned in this country? I don't think so, because that's a court decision. An example of where an IJ decision was not followed is this case of the Salvadoran man, Abogada Garcia, who had withholding of removal and despite that was deported to El Salvador. That's an example of them not following an IJ decision, and it's a bad, really, really bad one. But it's super duper rare. In general, IJ decisions are respected and will continue to be respected. Okay. That's it for the questions. I appreciate you all being here with me at the Dixie Dude Ranch in Bandera, Texas. If you are a person who likes riding horses and cowboy stuff, I recommend coming and checking this place out. It's a good place for families. They have like trail rides, and I'm watching the kids play tetherball and ping pong outside. And there's, cowboy songs around the campfire and stuff like that. That's what we're doing this week on our family vacation. But I couldn't miss you guys. I had to be here. I'm like sitting in the cafeteria right now, and these people are walking through going like, what the hell is this lady doing? But it worked. The internet worked. I got my gimbal here. I got my fantastic production crew, the Gandon Lees, atrás de las bambolinas, as they say in Spanish. Thanks, guys, for being here with me. And I will wrap up with our action item of the week, because I know a lot of people are like, what the heck can I do about everything that's happening? This is also upsetting. Here's what I want you guys to do this week. These are simple things that you can do to be involved. Find out who your state rep is, your state senator, and if they align with you politically, if they are of your party, give them a follow on social media and start to share some of their content. When you see them put out a video or they've, proposed some bill and they're trying to get it through, just share it and say like, this is my state rep, please support her. Do that. It's an easy follow. There's people doing good work and they need us to help amplify their voices. So go on in, find out who they are, support them if you align. And that's an easy action step for the week. So I'll be here on Thursday at noon in Spanish. I think so. I might be a different time because I'm recording in the lunchroom. So they probably won't let me do that at noon, but we'll figure the timing out. And then I'll see you guys next week at 11 a.m. in English. I appreciate you being here with me today. And hopefully next week I'll be giving you some good news. We'll see. Adios.